for today's session. Paloma?
Thank you very much, Kimberly. And of course, thank you very much, Gali, for accepting our invite, and to everybody that is taking time today to be here with us in this special report, as Kimberly mentioned, on rankings and research discoverability. This is what we are going to present today. First of all, we are going to present about ORCID cross markers so that all of you have a better understanding. Then the results of the analysis that SCImago with Gali on the head conducted, and also the connection between cross markers and rankings, and some strategic recommendations for institutions. And at the end of the session, we're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers. Some of the questions that you submitted in advance, but also, of course, the questions that you are going to be able to ask now. Something that I wanted to introduce first of all is things that you already probably know, but ORCID offers or provides three main services. The first of all is the ORCID ID, which is the unique persistent identifier for researchers. Together with that, we have the ORCID record, which is like the digital CV or profile that is connected to that ORCID ID and contains different metadata that represents the research career of a researcher. And finally, we have the ORCID APIs, which basically allow the connection of the ORCID API with institutional systems and vice versa. So you probably know that there are three ways to add data to an ORCID record. The first one is, of course, the user itself, the researcher herself or himself, adding that via the user interface manually. And those are what we call manually or self-asserted data. On the other hand, member organizations can add data using either the member API directly or a tool called the Affiliation Manager, which is available for consortium members. And in these two cases, the data added to the registry is considered validated or containing a trust marker. This is exactly what we are covering here. When an ORCID member organization includes data into the ORCID record, the source of the provenance of that data is also included in the source. This is not only on the user interface, but also in the metadata if you read that information via the member API or via the public API. That data with the trust marker can be then used for decision making or any other kind of organization or activity you are doing internally. Here you can see two examples of employment entries added respectively by the University of Groningen in the Netherlands in the top part, or down by Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev in Ukraine. As more ORCID members add data and their corresponding trust markers to records, then the more robust the entire scholarly record becomes. And it is also important to know that ORCID's trust markers are, at the end of the day, a very important part of this balance between researcher control and data quality, because member organizations can add data with the same level of quality they would like to read that data. In fact, if we think of trust and integrity, we can think of validated affiliations as a key component of combating the negative aspects of multi-affiliation. While multiple affiliations can be a very good sign of collaboration, it can also dilute a bit the recognition due to researchers' home institutions. And you have also some research performed by Gali Halevi, our presenter today, on that topic that you can read here. And institutions as well recognize the value of validated affiliation, as it makes kind of more official this part of the CV element that ORCID profile offers a user. And with that, I would like to give the word to Gali to continue with a deep dive on the report itself.
I think you're muted, Gali. Abby.
Okay, here we go. I think you can hear me now.
We can.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to, first of all, thank the ORCID team and Paloma, especially for giving us the opportunity to really dive into ORCID data to show how institutions, asserted affiliations, and data affect their ranking, but not just the research ranking, but other indicators. But before I begin, with everybody's permission, I'm sure you heard of the SCImago journal ranking and the SCImago institutional rankings and others. However, the SCImago Research Group and the Research Lab provides analytics and reporting on a large scale to institutions all over the world. I just wanted to put this in front of you because as a group, we have the capabilities and the data to provide really deep dives into institution performance, collaboration patterns, integrity patterns, and so forth. And you can check our website at SCImago And if after this presentation, anyone would like to get in touch, Kimberly and Paloma will have contact information also at the end of this presentation. So let's dive into the report itself. As Paloma mentioned a couple of minutes ago, there is a difference between when a researcher enters their data into an ORCID ID and an institution inserting that data in a standardized way. Anybody can create an ORCID ID. That's not the problem. Somebody was asking, is it free? Of course it's free. You can enter, you can create your own profile, you can enter your own works, you can manage your own profile. However, it's really important to understand, and from experience before this role, I was in charge of the research libraries at Mount Sinai. And with thousands of researchers creating researcher IDs, it was really, really difficult to manage the metadata for each one of them and to make sure that their ORCID IDs are complete and accurate. Most of you out there know that nowadays, when you submit a journal paper, when you try to submit anything, even to conferences, they will ask you for your ORCID ID. So it's really important to have one profile, not 10. Even if you forget your password, don't create another one. But also, it's even better if the institution you're working in really manages that data flow and ensures that it is complete and accurate for you. And in this report, you will see why. So trusted metadata is one thing. And when we're going to show you during this presentation, when an institution takes the leadership on creating these IDs and content, it actually has a positive effect on their rankings. Research rankings, societal impact, innovation impact, and so forth. And this is exactly what we sought out to discover with Paloma and the team. Is there really a connection between institutional asserted affiliations data and the ranking overall of the institution? So research visibility, verified institutional research data, it's trusted, and the adoption also shows positive effect on performance. Now, what did we ask in this report? The research questions. Do institutional asserted affiliation correlate with ranking? Is there even a connection between the two? We didn't know. Does the integration with ORCID aligns with research performance, not just rankings overall, but with research performance? And we also added to that an analysis of the region and the different institutional types. So we wanted to see currently, with current data, where we are as far as ORCID adoption, and institutional management. Now, here's the data, and it was quite a large. Data set, as you can see. So ORCID provided us with almost 9 million researcher profiles and almost 13 million affiliations. Now, we took that data and we classified the profiles and we divided them between profiles that were individually created and those that the institution created and is managing. This is the core point of what we're presenting today. What is the difference? The difference is I'm a researcher, I work at the university, created my own profile, nobody manages it, or my institution actually manages all the researcher profiles for me and others. We took this information, all this data, and we enriched it with SCImago data. SCImago data, in SCImago, we use Scopus data, but we also do our own institutional cleanup. We do enriched data for each institution with the sector, with the region, size, research output, and so forth. So on top of the data that we have from Scopus, from Elsevier, we do our own enrichment in order to provide even deeper insights when we analyze institutions or research data overall. This data was linked to Scopus and the SCImago ranking, institutional ranking. So it enabled us to really compare across ranking tiers, sectors, and geography, as you will see. So what did we look for exactly? What were the components of our analysis? So trust markers, like Paloma said, it refers to institution-asserted affiliation data, where the organization validates the researcher's connections, content, works, anything, to ensure accurate and authoritative attribution. And this is super important if you think about it, to make sure that a researcher ID is consistent, right? So when you submit a journal, when you have something published, that it is attributed to you and not to somebody else, maybe with the same name or maybe with a variation of your name. When it is managed that way, most likely your works will be attributed to you. Now, another key component was to compare across ranking performance. So what are the adoption level that we examined? Institutional ranking, but also we tried to see whether or not they have higher visibility, higher innovation ratings, not just the research and ranking, but also other aspects. And I saw, by the way, in a question that somebody submitted before the session, because yes, in SCImago, we don't just look at research ranking, we look at societal impact, we look at innovation impact, etc. So this was another layer that we were able to provide. We analyzed all the data based on region, geographical region, and sector. So is it a university? Is it a funder, a research institution, a company, maybe, like pharmaceuticals, also publish in journals, etc. So that was another layer. And finally, we have analyzed the data to discover whether higher adoption really suggests more advanced integration of persistent identifiers and metadata standards and interoperability research information systems. So are these institutions are also advanced in their management of their research output. So how did we classify the profiles? We measured for each institution. We took all that data and we analyzed it to see where it's coming from. Is it individual who inserted that data, or is it coming from a trust marker, which is the university or institution? So this way we could compare trust marker adoption across university, even for different sizes, different regions, and different research capacities. And that classification and that distinction between individually asserted information or data and institutional one, it really helps identify institutions with more advanced digital identity practices, and those that are in the ranking themselves are showing more advanced research management and awareness. So what we tested was we examined whether high level of institutional asserted ORCID adoption are linked to institutional performance. We used several statistical tests to compare adoption level with overall rankings, as well as research, innovation, societal impact indicators. And we also explored whether these relationships differ across regions. Now, for the entire methodology and the entire analysis, you can refer to the full report, which Kimberly will provide at the end of the session. It's open, and you can read about all the tests that we've done and the methodology that we deployed for this specific report. Okay, so what did we find? We find there was some interesting finding in this. So the strongest connection we found between institutional asserted affiliation data was societal impact. So institutions who have affiliations or institution data management show higher societal impact in the ranking. That was the highest, most impactful one. And it makes sense, really, because ORCID is open. There is more opportunity to promote the research from the institution. It links many times to outreach and tracking policy, and also community activities and engagement. So if the institution manages the profiles and ensures that the data is accurate, most likely it will result with higher visibility. And that, if you think about it, can really help with collaborations, with funding, with the real world implications of research. Next, we found a moderate but very steady connection between trust markers, the institutional asserted affiliation data, and research impact, meaning that higher ranking institutions show more university managed ORCID data. It's moderate. I think we are in the process of it being more acknowledged, but it is steady, and we could see that in the data. And when you see the report, you can see also the actual graphs and tables that we have them. So lower ranked institutions in the overall SCImago institutional ranking show more individual profile management, and higher institution ranking show more affiliation asserted profile data. And that, I think, was for us the big revelation in this report. Now, in innovation ranking, that was the weakest one we could find, and it makes sense because innovation is related to patents. It's sometimes very tied to corporations, and in the innovation performance, we didn't see that much of a link, because we feel that most of it is because those authors manage their own ORCID data, and there's probably not enough awareness of corporations and other type of research institutions to manage their ORCID data, not like universities, for example. So if we think about hospitals, or we think about pharmaceutical companies and such, That's the weakest part we could find. It's there, we could see that, we could see a connection, but it's not as prevalent as higher education institutions. I think what we've seen are seeds of that happening. And we're hoping that with this type of webinar, we'll also raise awareness to this because that's important as well. But it's there, but in its beginning. So someone asked about the global findings. And what we found was the higher adoption is in Western Europe, North America, and Pacific. And the lowest adoption is Asia, Latin America, and Africa. So we did a regional analysis. And in the high adoption region, likely showing a more mature research infrastructure and policies, strong policies for ORCID and integrated research information systems. In the lower adoption regions, we hypothesize that it is because of limited institutional integration and more reliance on researcher self-entry rather than an institutional one. And one of the reasons also we wanted to raise awareness to this, because I can't see at the moment where everybody's from, is that it's a good example for other regions to adopt this institutional level of ORCID data management. Because as you can see, with mature institutional performance, it actually it makes the ranking better, it makes the visibility better. So for us, it was important to raise awareness that there are some regions that should be working towards an institutional managed ORCID data and data flow. And again, everything you see here, I just want to reiterate, it's really a summary. But the full report, once you read it, it has all the details regarding this analysis if you would like more information. So industry, the sector analysis that I referred to at the beginning, as I said, higher education dominates adoption. And it's not a surprise, right? Because universities are competing for rankings, they're competing for funding, they're competing for students. So higher education dominates the adoption. They are the highest percentage ones that are managing ORCID data. Government and healthcare are moderate. Those sectors within the government and the health sector, it's there. We could see signs of adoption, but it is not as prevalent as higher education. The private sector, not surprisingly, is the lowest, right? So we feel that government offices and health sector use it regularly, and I know that also from experience, but not as extensively as academia, although our recommendation is to really pay attention. If anybody is out there, it's really important, especially for funders. Private sector is not surprising because it might be that the business approach, the corporate environment has less of a system-wide adoption. But again, if somebody is listening to us right now and works in large corporations that does publish extensively, it is really worth paying attention to this adoption on a systematic level. The bottom line, adoption is stronger in academia, moderate in the public service, and weakest in the private sector. And this is something we feel we should be watching for. So why all this important? You know, I've been talking and talking and talking, but really, what's the bottom line? So when you have ORCID managed on a system level, what you get is improved attribution of outputs, affiliations, funding, reducing ambiguity from name variation to institutional changes, institutional variations. It just makes your work consistent and all the output from your institution correctly tracked for rankings, for funding, for anything, for research visibility. So it's really important we feel that it comes from the top down and rather than individuals managing their own profile. Research visibility, as I said, ORCID linked outputs are more discoverable because ORCID is open. So the entire system is open. If you try, those of you out there that are researchers, if you try to Google your name, probably the second or third entry will be your ORCID ID. I know it's mine. So when I Google my name, I will see where I am, but maybe 3 items down, I will see my ORCID ID pop up. So anything you do is much more visible. There is no barrier, unlike paid databases, for you to click and see your profile. Here, it's open. So it really allows you, as a researcher, to make your output a lot more visible. And if it's more accurate, the better. And remember, all this data on an institutional level is often used for analytics. So the more complete ORCID ID or ORCID data you have, the clearer the insights into the impact that your institution is making, not just the overall ranking, but as I said, societal impact, patient impact, research impact, and so forth. So as a key point here, an institution needs to understand that the more accurate the data is, the more clear and stronger analytics can be done on their research output. So what are the key takeaways? So institutional asserted ORCID data signals digital maturity, as we could see, and you can see in the report. So the active assertion of ORCID affiliation reflects integrated workflows, research management, stewardship. In the full report, you will see that these institutions showed more complete and consistently linked researcher records, which is important. And as you saw in the summary that I was just going through, associated with stronger institutional performance, not just research, overall ranking, and also by the different dimensions. Overall ranking we saw, but also, as I said, societal and visibility impact. So they correlate with higher ranking, improved visibility, greater adoption, aligned with stronger performance, and more reliable analytics. And finally, for you, this is, and Kimberly will send that along to you. This is the full report can be downloaded from ORCID and our website. And for those of you who are taking screenshot, if anyone out there is interested in getting in touch and would like to ask questions or would like to explore mutual research, please feel free to contact me via email, on Viber, on WhatsApp, and of course through my LinkedIn profile. And I want to thank you again for the attention.
Yes, and thank you, Gali, for the wonderful presentation. The Q&A has been quite active, so we'll dive
I can
in.
see.
I have just launched a poll, just gathering what folks thought about the session and where their minds are at now. So please feel free to complete that poll as you think about questions for Gali and Paloma. Let me open up the Q&A here and we'll go ahead and get started. Gali, this question is for you. Do you think it benefits to add the impact factor of a journal indexed in the SCImago
No,
platform.
no, I don't see. I really don't see, I think, and maybe this is a good time for me to say something about impact factor to all of you that are out there. Impact factor was designed for journals, not for people. It is not an indicator that should be or was never designed to evaluate researchers. It is to evaluate journals. Of course, it's wonderful that you were published in a high impact factor journal, no doubt, but please refrain from connecting impact factor, which is a journal impact factor, to overall researcher performance. The reason is, one more sentence, because all of you out there, do much more than publish in journals, and that is not captured, right? So you teach and you have other activities that you're involved in. You publish in conferences, you do presentations, you may be mentors. Impact factor is not built for that. So let's refrain from mixing the two. Okay, so that's not the point. So my opinion, no. And we should really train ourselves to think of those as two different things.
I think you're speaking everyone's language. I can see a lot of clapping and hearts going on. So thank you for that. I think a question about the process of conducting the study. Did you perform comparisons of individual and institutional profiles within the same organization?
So we received the institution and all the ORCID data from ORCID. So we had institutional data, and we have the entire record. Our job, with the help of Paloma, was to really distinguish between data that was entered by an individual versus data that was entered by the institution. So, and that's what we've done. Paloma and the team were able to indicate which record is coming from where. And then our job was to take a look at the institutions that were institutional asserted versus individual asserted. I hope that answers the question. So Paloma can add to that because ORCID, and for all of you who have ORCID ID, you know how it works, because in ORCID, you can add data manually or you can add it from somewhere else. So there is a way on the back end to know how it got there. Maybe Paloma would like to add.
Thank you very much, Gali. So basically, this comes back to what I very, very briefly explained, saying that that trust marker is not only visible on the user interface. On the user interface, you will see the source, then a green tick, and then the name of the system or institution that added that data. But also, if you use the metadata, which basically Gali and her team used for this analysis, in the metadata itself, you're going to be able to see the origin of that item. And the field, I can't remember exactly the name of the field, but it says origin on it. And there you will see whether that's the ORCID ID of the person saying this is a self-asserted item, or whether that's the name and the ID of the organization, the client ID of that particular integration. So in case you are performing also analysis at an institutional level or regional level, or reusing ORCID metadata for any kind of purpose, this is the way to distinguish whether that's a self-asserted or a
Yes.
institutionally asserted item.
Exactly, and that helped us perform the analysis much more accurately because ORCID tracks where it's coming from. And within millions of records, you can imagine that this type of distinguished origin helped us with the analysis.
Wonderful. Thank you both for that answer. Our next question is looking for some clarity around ranking systems. So when you talk about improved rankings, which ranking systems are you referring to specifically?
the SCImago Institutional Rankings, SIR. You can check it online as we speak right now. SCImago has its own institutional ranking that is very well known around the world and is one of a very few. So this is the ranking that I'm referring to. SCImago Institutional Ranking, SIR, and it's online. You can, it's open and you can browse it at your leisure. And if you have any questions on that particular, there's a methodology section there. It's very transparent and the institutional profile are quite detailed. But again, if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer after the session.
Great. Thanks, Gally. Paloma, did you have something to add?
No, that's
Okay.
I think that's perfectly answered. I was just
Excellent.
typing a question that was raised in Spanish.
I
You
saw
just
that one.
answered that one.
Let's test my Spanish now, Paloma. Let's see. Let's
So
go.
I did want to address that question. Someone was asking if we would host the session in Spanish, and that is a conversation that we had. So I think we'll take that under consideration, knowing that it's of interest, and I would expect to hear some stuff from us in the future
Oh,
about
thank you.
hosting this in Spanish soon.
I'll speak with Rodrigo because whomever asked that, I appreciate you. I am learning Spanish and struggling a little bit, and I cannot do a presentation like this in Spanish. Paloma can tell you, she saw me in action. But if there is
Not
enough,
that bad.
it wasn't that good either. But yeah, but if there's enough interest, Kimberly and Paloma, I will speak to my colleagues that are based in Spain, and we can talk about doing the same session in Spanish. Absolutely, that shouldn't be a barrier.
Wonderful. Thanks, Callie. This next question is about trust markers, but I think, Paloma, if you could give just another brief overview of what exactly a trust marker is. I think there's some confusion here with someone wondering if trust markers are for scholarships.
I think this is a very good question. So trust markers aren't for things. It's just an indicator of how the data got to the ORCID record. So we separate data that was added manually by the researcher, and this includes, there was also previously a question in the chat as well. This includes any data that a researcher adds manually, either if that's the person typing directly on the user interface, or if that's the person using an import tool, for example. Separately is any kind of information that was added by a organization, regardless the section. It could be affiliations, it could be professional activities, it could be scholarship or funding, as I think the question is more related to the funding part, works, or any other kind of data, peer reviews that was added to the ORCID record. And as mentioned, by a institution or institutional connection. So yeah, you can find data in the funding section, for example, about awards or scholarships that has been added by a member organization. For example, it is quite common that funders add this type of information, and we have now an important pool of funders also adding this type of information.
Excellent. Thanks, Paloma. I hope that clarifies what exactly we feel a trust marker is and how they are used. My next question comes from some of our registration questions that we had, and I want to bring this up because of the poll that we launched at the end of the session. I'm seeing one of the questions that we asked was, how likely are you to share the findings of this study with your institutional leadership? And over 40% said very likely, and another 40% said likely. So my question is, what are the most compelling arguments that I can take to university leadership to move ORCID from a quiet administrative tool to a core strategic priority?
Right. So I'm happy to answer that. Compelling argument. One, you can show your administrators or your leadership that a managed ORCID, institutional managed ORCID data shows direct linkage to better ranking. So that's one thing that you can really see in the report, and it's something that you can take to them. It's also directly related to research visibility. And regardless of where are you around the world, research visibility, as we know, is crucial for the development and advancement of any institution. The more visible your research is, the more opportunities you have to collaborate, to expand, to receive funding from multiple sources. So that's another thing that you can take to leadership. And finally, I think also it shows maturity, right? Because if you look at the organizations that are showing this strong ranking and connection to ORCID institutional managed data, you can see that those are established. Those are mature institutions. So for me, if I were you, I would say it's a next step to reach that maturity for our organization, for our institution. It's just a next step in the entire research management cycle. So for me, it's not just an admin tool. And I know I'm doing Paluma's job now, but I am a big ORCID fan. So it's not just an admin tool. It's not something that you just keep. It is becoming, and I'm sure a lot of you know, that it's becoming very central to any publications you have, to any submissions that you do. So the better data you have, the better chances you have to succeed. That's how I feel as a researcher myself and someone that was formerly in academia.
Excellent. Thanks, Gally. I can also see in the first poll that we launched, about 30% of folks said that cultural hurdles, low awareness or engagement, and strategic hurdles, lack of leadership buy-in or mandate, were the main barriers that they're experiencing at their institution. So hopefully, I think that was a very helpful answer for them. Paloma, I think this question will be for you next. I would like to know if there are any initiatives to create metrics for the completeness of ORCID profiles in order to promote the quality of academic data.
That's also an excellent question. Actually, it all depends on how we define completeness, because completeness is one of these metadata dimensions that are very difficult to exactly measure, as it might be better to talk about fitness for purpose in terms of how the profile is completed. However, there are indeed some studies, in this case comparing ORCID according to data in dimensions in this other database, where you can see also per country the so-called completeness of the ORCID record, determining how many ORCIDs are in the metadata available in dimension. I'm more than happy to share that research with you and actually with the entire audience. And this can be also helpful. We recently last year or the year before, about a year and a half ago, we wrote a blog post about Portugal. And that piece of research I'm referring to is linked in that blog post as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paloma. Gally, our next question is for you. I would like to understand if SCImago has a public data file that can be used for analysis of citations at national and institutional level, just like ORCID's public data file.
No, we do not have an open data file. Our data is enriched from Scopus data, and as everybody knows, Scopus data belongs to Elsevier. We have the right to use that data for research purposes, and we enrich it with our own data. So it's not publicly available just to download. Sorry.
Thanks for that. No,
but I'm
perfect.
happy. But if somebody is interested in doing a research project, I'm happy to talk about it. So, but it's not available out there just for download.
Excellent. Thanks. for that. Our next question is, do you think a national level organization could validate ORCID profile affiliations on behalf of research and innovation ecosystem actors?
This is actually a tricky question, and the answer is it depends. So it basically depends on how that platform is structured in the ecosystem and how institutions like research institution, universities, or any other actor is using that platform. In general lines, when we speak about affiliations, what we say is that a certain institution should be the one owning that data. So, for example, if I'm the University of Granada in Spain, I will be able to say the information about my students and my researchers. If I have a researcher that previously was at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, then I'm not going to be able to assert that information because I'm not the origin of that information. This has, of course, to be analyzed case by case, depending on how the national platform in question is configured.
Great, thanks, Paloma. Gally, our next question does come from registration, and the question is, how can an institution specifically use ORCID data to better track and showcase its total research production and global impact?
Well, I think that's actually for Paloma, but I can answer that. So when you have an institutional managed data in ORCID, it is a lot easier to retrieve that data, analyze it for impact, right? And that impact could be anything you want to measure, as long as the works are there, they're tracked. And by works, I just want to say one more thing. It's not just journal articles. I don't know, those of you who have ORCID ID, it's everything. You can put your conference presentations in there, white papers, anything you can do. You can enter whatever it is that you want, as long as the university tracks that and makes sure that everything is accurate and complete. And then that university can take all that data and really do an analysis on that. So they can do citation analysis, they can do downloads analysis, they can do social altmetrics analysis, whatever it is. But the first step is to have a reliable database of all your records, right? And the only way we feel, and after conducting this report, is that to have your research management do that and be responsible for that. So it is consistent with the output.
Excellent. Paloma, anything you want to add?
No, the only thing that I could add that I think is also connected to other questions that we've been receiving is that at the end of the day, the importance of institutions asserting information is that they are going to be able to assert with the same level of quality they would like to read that information.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, if I would like to read a certain output with certain type of data, or if I would like to read a complete affiliation like the role, the title, the department, dates, and if I have the power to write this type of information in that complete way, then it's part of what we described as community trust network, because everybody is also contributing for others to be able to reuse and so on.
Exactly.
Excellent, thank you. Paloma, our next question is a little more technical about ORCID. They give quite a bit of context about their situation, but essentially, how do we add assertions of awards into ORCID records if the award is not coming from a single university, but collectively by a group of universities?
Mm-hmm. I think that's also a very interesting question, and definitely we can discuss more about this specific case separately. In general lines, what we need is an origin of that information. The name we provide for that origin on the user interface can be, of course, discussed. And we have at the moment many examples of institutions or even group of institutions promoting these type of awards. So it won't be a matter of who or who decides on that award, but basically the name we provide as origin of this information. But definitely it's a very good initiative, and we are seeing more and more of those awards. So it will be great to have them written to ORCID Records, and we're more than happy to support you with that.
Yes, absolutely. We still have about 8 minutes for questions. I've got a couple in the Q&A, but if there's anything pressing, please feel free to submit it while we have Paloma and Gally here. Gally, our next question is, how often does SCImago release institutional rankings? And in case an institutional goes on to add trust markers to the ORCID profiles of its researchers, when should they expect to see an improvement in the rankings?
Right, right. That's interesting. So the rankings are released once a year, and of course we update the data more often. I wish I could tell you 3 months, but I can. It really depends on completeness, right, Daniel? I think you asked that. So let's say you start working on creating that data within your institution, and they adopt this approach. The more complete the data is, the more indexed journal articles and others are there. You could probably see the results of that within the next cycle. It really depends on the rate and how fast that happens. But again, it depends on the completeness of the data and calculations, right? There is no certain time. It really depends on the work that you will do within your university.
Great, thanks, Gally. Our next question is for ORCID. How can ORCID support independent initiatives or non-academic projects such as circular economy programs connecting different regions?
Another question that might vary case by case. So depending on the regions that you are connecting and the goal of the projects, we do have a grant program that can serve in that situation to generate more awareness of ORCID in that particular region or group. However, if that's not the case, ORCID IDs are available for everybody connected to research somehow. You can be a researcher employed by a research institution, or you can be an independent researcher. So if you are performing any kind of research, Gali was mentioning that before, it doesn't matter the type of outputs you have. Even if those outputs are intellectual property, you can also include the metadata on ORCID records. So that will be available for for non university associated researchers, so to say, and also for a project in different areas like circular economy or
Right, right.
Excellent. We have one last question, and I think it's a good question to end on. Kind of, Daniel has submitted another question. If we don't get to it, I'll make sure that we share this question and can answer it afterwards. But the last question that I would like to end on, I think, is a good question that will help really put a nice cherry on top of this wonderful webinar. Can you just tell us what is the relationship between research discoverability and rankings?
Right. So the most obvious answer is the more exposure you get, the more citations you receive, the more downloads you will see, the more tweets, blogs, posts your research will get, right? So if your research is discoverable, it's available, your metrics will go up, and that those things have direct impact on rankings. So that's the most obvious answer. And I wanted to add one more thing to what Paloma was saying from experience. It is really important for anybody out there right now creating your research ID and ORCID ID. You have to make sure that you don't create more than one. okay? Because that is just confusing. And so your profile will be split across different profiles, and it's really hard to track. So do it once. If you forget your password, just do forget password, go back to your original, and always remember your number. So all your works are attributed to you and are discoverable. In this way, it influences your own researcher profile, but also your institutional ranking.
Excellent. Thanks, Gally. And then we do have time, so we'll go ahead and get to Daniel's question, which is if a researcher is affiliated to two institutions, and both of these institutions have added trust markers for the institutional affiliation, which institution takes the credit for the publications that the researcher pushes out? Is there a way to define the primary university to be recognized for that publication as the funding institution, especially for scenarios where the research was funded by one institution of the two?
So this is a very interesting question, and we have partially a solution, but of course you need to remember that it is not only the affiliation that is on the ORCID record. You can then also mention exactly the affiliation on papers or others. So first of all, this is a question of managing multiple affiliations. What we've done on the user interface is allowing researchers to select their main affiliation. So at the moment, what's the most prominent affiliation? We're in the process of updating this metadata also via the API, but at least on the user interface, that's available. On the other hand, if there is research being funded by the institution in question, what we can do, or the institution and of course the researcher, what can be done is selecting the funded by option in the work metadata and then connect to the specific project connected at the same time to the specific institution. Okay, so that way you will have that part covered. So hopefully that helps. Anyways, we do have several several questions around that, and we are going to add more clarity in our documentation and blog post about it, because it is indeed important and is indeed a situation that many organizations face.
Yeah. And Jennifer is saying, yeah, I understand the issue, Jennifer. Yes, the problem is multiple ORCID IDs, and that's something an institution should really manage because otherwise the research is split. And that's a shame because it's not accounted for.
Absolutely. Well, that is our time for today. So I want to thank Gally not only for your collaboration on this webinar, but of course on the reporting and everything that we've found in this rankings report. And Paloma, thank you for your time today and leading this initiative. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I've dropped a few extra links in the chat. There's a link to an ORCID blog that is a good summary of the report. There's also a download link to the report, so you can download that. And then also a link to all of our upcoming events. Stay tuned. You'll likely see a Spanish version of this session in the next coming months.
It looks like that.
Thank you.
Looks like that. Oh, Rodrigo thought he's not going to do it, but I think he is.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gally. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, everybody.
See you
Goodbye.
soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.